first element is, what is the objective? And this really looks at whether it's a job, whether it's wanting to, buy something online. It's determining what the purpose of the activity is. The second question is, what is essential? And this comes from a term of art from the ADA and other laws that are referenced as having essential job functions. So in an employment context, if you want to be a truck driver, it's essential to be able to operate a vehicle safely. It may or may not be essential to be able to go, long periods of time without, say, taking an injection for diabetes, which is also another covered accommodation. The third question is, what is reasonable? So again, we have the other side of the coin here. You can reasonably figure out a way for a truck driver with diabetes to make sure that they are getting food when they need to keep their blood glucose in the right, within the right parameters. You can look at scheduling things to keep that on track with some minor modifications. You can't, however, modify the job to such a degree that a person who cannot operate a vehicle safely can go be a successful truck driver. Sorry, Angela, you're not becoming a truck driver anytime soon. And the fourth is the accommodation achievable? And this one really comes down to a doctrine from the Americans with Disabilities Act and other laws that make sure that a requested accommodation does not cross the line into being unduly burdensome for the business. So if you are staying with the trucking story here, if you are running a tight schedule of short deliveries, it may be slightly harder to modify that schedule than, say, somebody who's driving long haul, where you have, various points along the way over the course of several hours or days where you can break things up, as opposed to a very tight schedule that might require more intricate tweaking. Accessibility at its best is creating a win-win proposition. So I think that's where the reasonableness comes into play. That's also where the undue burden, or as I would like to switch it, undue burden is a double negative. That's not only questionable grammatically, but it really puts it introduces a scarcity mindset into the equation that probably doesn't need to be there. A much more helpful way to look at it is, what is the achievability of implementing a certain accommodation or accessibility feature? On the customer-facing side, if you're in a physical store and you've got a tight budget and you've just happened to inherit a building that probably should have had a ramp and doesn't, it's going to be a lot more burdensome to do that than it will be if you're looking to put in, say, braille signage, which is a lot less expensive, or an automatic door, and you've got a higher budget. So there's a lot of give and take here, saying, okay, in a perfect world, yes, the world would be designed so that everyone can access it equally. But the reality of the matter is that the world is highly inaccessible, and forcing businesses to comply at the risk of that business going under really isn't the purpose of the law, and it's not the purpose of the broader accessibility movement, because we want to have places to shop, we want to have places that'll employ us, and that's not going to happen if we're if we're preaching compliance to the point where it is causing businesses to lay people off or close their doors. And I'm also going to put another needle on in this and say that the accessibility landscape, you may have heard, is always changing. While the laws such as the ADA have been in place for 34 years, some laws have been in place longer. There hasn't been a major amendment to the ADA and a couple of administrations. Actually, I think about three administrations. I think the last one was during the George W. Bush administration, which, not to be political, but just to show how long it goes between alterations. That is true. However, the case law, or how the law is interpreted, is changing drastically and can be interpreted at different places in different ways in different parts of the country. So that is why Real Life Access and my nonprofit Pieces of Me Foundation, we teach universal design and looking forward to creating solutions that work, knowing that they are going to weather any kind of regulatory climate, as opposed to other alternatives that are looking at strict compliance and may require pretty significant alterations down the line as the law changes. So that's one of the key takeaways is, universal design is going to clear the compliance hurdle by a good margin. It's going to be much more dynamic as opposed to compliance, which is not going to have those same benefits and is subject to different interpretations of the laws and doesn't really take into account the overall user experience the way that we wish it should. And the final thing I want to point out too that a lot of people don't know is that if you go to your average contract or business lawyer on the streets, the odds that they have a wide-ranging understanding of disability law and how it connects to their field of law are unfortunately quite slim. The level of awareness that I had in my legal education, that just concluded slightly over 3 years ago, was very, very low. It was only a couple of cases here and there, not nearly enough to prepare businesses or lawyers to help businesses navigate adequately and effectively serving what is the world's largest minority. So that's a case where you want to have some good legal help, but you also want to be working with people like Angela, who are designers at heart, who are always staying ahead of the compliance and regulatory curve, because that's going to be the best way to not only not avoid getting sued, but I think more importantly, create the kind of experience you want every one of your customers, every one of your employees to have.